Barnaby Steele had been waiting 3 weeks for this moment. The magnificent Appaloosa stallion stood in the center of Redemption Gulch's main street, its spotted coat gleaming in the afternoon sun, muscles rippling as it tossed its proud head. Barnaby had paid top dollar for this horse at auction in Denver, but he knew he could triple his investment if he could just convince the right buyer, and the right buyer had just ridden into town. Jedediah Jed Stone was a legend in the Wyoming Territory, a mountain man who stood 6'6", with the kind of powerfully muscular build that made other men instinctively step aside. His broad shoulders, defined chest and arms, and the distinctive six-pack of abdominal muscles, visible even through his buckskin shirt, spoke of years spent surviving in the harshest conditions. He had dark hair that touched his collar, a weathered face marked by scars, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to see right through a person. He was also known to be wealthy, though he lived simply in a remote cabin in the Wind River country. Rumors said he'd struck it rich in the California gold fields before retreating to Wyoming, and that he paid in gold coin when he bought supplies. Barnaby had been watching for Jed's quarterly supply run, and now his patience was paying off. "Mr. Stone," Barnaby called out with his most ingratiating smile, "just the man I wanted to see. Come look at this magnificent animal, finest Appaloosa I've ever had the privilege of selling. Strong, fast, smart, worth every penny of the $300 I'm asking." Jed dismounted from his own horse, a sturdy but unremarkable gelding, and approached the Appaloosa with the careful eye of someone who knew horseflesh. He examined the stallion's legs, teeth, and overall conformation with practiced efficiency. "Good horse," Jed admitted in his deep, rumbling voice. "Worth maybe 200, not 300. "Ah, but you haven't seen him run," Barnaby protested. "This horse has speed and endurance that—" His sales pitch was interrupted by a commotion at the far end of the street. A freight wagon was pulling up, and several people were gathering around it with the kind of morbid curiosity that usually meant trouble. Jed's attention shifted to the disturbance, and Barnaby cursed internally. He was losing his sale to whatever drama was unfolding. "Indentured servant for sale," a harsh voice called out. "Come see what I've got. Strong back, willing to work, only 5 years left on the contract." Jed's expression darkened, but he walked toward the wagon with long, purposeful strides. Barnaby followed, unwilling to let his potential buyer escape. What he saw when they reached the wagon made even his merchant's heart flinch with discomfort. A young woman, perhaps 19 or 20 years old, sat in the back of the wagon, her wrists bound in front of her. She was substantially overweight, easily 350 pounds, wearing a stained and torn dress that had clearly seen better days. Her face was bruised, and she kept her eyes downcast as the wagon owner, a cruel-looking man named Silas Grant, gestured toward her like she was livestock. "This here's Willow May Higgins," Grant announced. "Bought her contract from her father 2 years ago to work my farm. She's slow, eats too much, and ain't worth the trouble, but someone might get some use out of her. I'm asking $70 for the remaining 5 years of her service." The crowd's reaction was mixed, some laughter, some uncomfortable shifting, some outright mockery. $70 for that?" someone called out. "You should be paying someone to take her." "I'll give you $20, another voice added. "But only if you throw in a team of mules to haul her around." Willow May flinched at each cruel comment, but kept her eyes down, her body language screaming defeat and despair. Barnaby noticed Jed's hands clenching into fists, saw a muscle jumping in his jaw. "How did she get those bruises?" Jed asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Grant shrugged. "Girl's clumsy, falls down a lot. Besides, discipline is part of an owner's right when dealing with indentured servants who don't work fast enough." "You hit her," Jed said flatly. "I discipline my property," Grant corrected. "And if you're thinking of making trouble, Mountain Man, remember that I've got legal papers saying I own her contract. Sheriff's already seen them and approved the sale." Jed looked at Willow May for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. $70, you said?" Barnaby's heart sank. He could see what was coming, could see his $300 horse sale disappearing in favor of a $70 servant contract. But he couldn't quite believe it until Jed reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. "I'll take her," Jed said, counting out gold coins into Grant's greedy hands. $70, and the contract transfers to me immediately." Grant's eyes lit with avarice as he snatched the money and produced a battered piece of paper. "Sign here, and she's all yours. Good riddance, I say. You'll regret it within a week when you see how useless she is." Jed signed the paper, then turned to Willow May and held out his hand. "Miss Higgins, I'm Jedediah Stone. You're coming with me, but not as an indentured servant. I'm going to free you from that contract. You'll work for me if you're willing, for fair wages and fair treatment. Or if you'd rather go elsewhere, I'll give you enough money to start fresh wherever you choose. Your choice." Willow May's head snapped up, her brown eyes wide with shock and disbelief. You're freeing me?" "I am," Jed confirmed. "No one should be treated the way Grant was treating you. Now come on, let's get those ropes off your wrists and get you cleaned up." As Jed helped Willow May down from the wagon, his strong arms handling her weight easily, Barnaby finally found his voice. "Mr. Stone, what about the horse? Surely you still need a good mount." "The horse is fine, but I don't need it," Jed said without looking back. "This young woman needed help more than I needed a stallion. Good day, Barnaby." Barnaby watched in stunned disbelief as Jed led Willow May toward the general store, presumably to buy her proper clothes and supplies. His $300 sale had just evaporated because the mountain man had chosen to rescue an obese girl instead of buying a prize horse. "He's going to regret that," Grant said with a cruel laugh. "That fat girl will eat him out of house and home and do half the work of a normal servant. He threw away $70 on garbage, but Barnaby, watching Jed's protective stance as he guided Willow May through the staring crowd, wasn't so sure. There was something in the mountain man's expression of fierce protectiveness, a sense of purpose that suggested this was far from a bad decision in Jed's mind. At the general store, Jed purchased sturdy traveling clothes for Willow May, along with a warm coat, good boots, and supplies for a long journey. Mrs. Henderson, the store owner's wife, helped Willow May change in the back room and emerged looking concerned. "Mr. Stone," she said quietly, "that girl has been severely beaten. Not just recently, she's got scars from repeated abuse. Whatever you paid for her contract, you may have saved her life by getting her away from Grant." "That's what I figured," Jed said grimly. "Can you tend to her wounds while I finish gathering supplies?" When Willow May finally emerged, cleaned up and in proper clothes, she looked exhausted, but also cautiously hopeful. Jed helped her onto his horse and swung up behind her, and they rode out of Redemption Gulch without a backward glance. They rode for several hours before Jed finally spoke. "I need to explain something to you, Miss Higgins. Why I bought your contract, and why I'm freeing you." "You don't owe me an explanation," Willow May said quietly. "You've already done more for me than anyone has in years." "Maybe not, but I want you to understand," Jed continued. 7 years ago, I had a sister. Her name was Sarah, and she was the kindest person I ever knew. She was also quite heavy, not as much as you, but enough that people mocked her constantly. Our father saw her as an embarrassment and essentially sold her to a farmer as an indentured servant to work off her keep, as he put it. His voice grew rough with old pain. That farmer worked her to death. Within 2 years, my sister was dead from exhaustion, malnutrition, and abuse. I was in California at the time, made my fortune in the gold fields, and by the time I got back to Wyoming to find her, she'd been buried 6 months. The farmer faced no consequences because she was just an indentured servant who couldn't keep up with the work. He paused, then continued, "When I saw you in that wagon, with those bruises and that defeated look, all I could see was Sarah. I couldn't save her, but I could save you. So I did. That's why I bought your contract, and that's why I'm freeing you, because no one should suffer the way my sister did." Willow May was crying silently, tears streaming down her round face. "I'm sorry about your sister, and thank you for seeing me as worth saving. Most people don't." "Most people are fools," Jed said bluntly. "Worth isn't determined by size or appearance. It's determined by character, courage, and capability. And you had the courage to survive Grant's abuse, which tells me plenty about your character." They reached Jed's cabin after 3 days of travel. It was a substantial structure in a protected valley, with good land, clear water, and stunning mountain views. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable and well organized. "This is your home now, if you want it," Jed said. "The spare room is yours. I'll teach you whatever skills you need, hunting, trapping, mountain survival. In return, I'd appreciate help with cooking, cleaning, and managing the household. But this is employment, not servitude. You'll be paid fair wages, you'll have time off, and you're free to leave whenever you choose. Understood?" "Understood," Willow May whispered, looking around at the warm, safe cabin that was such a contrast to Grant's harsh farm. "Thank you, Mr. Stone. I'll work hard, I promise." "Call me Jed," he said, "and I'm not worried about you working hard. I'm more interested in you healing body and spirit. Take whatever time you need." Over the following months, Willow May discovered that Jed was a man of his word in every way. He treated her with consistent respect and kindness, never commented on her size or eating habits, never made her feel ashamed or inadequate. He taught her skills patiently, valued her contributions, and paid her a fair wage that he deposited into an account in her name at the bank in the nearest town. More than that, he helped her heal from years of abuse and mockery. Under his patient care and steady respect, Willow May began to see herself differently, not as the worthless burden her father and Grant had told her she was, but as a capable, valuable person with skills and worth. She proved to be an excellent student, quickly mastering skills like shooting, tracking, and wilderness survival. She was also naturally gifted at healing, learning about medicinal plants, and becoming skilled at treating injuries and illnesses. Trappers and hunters in the area began coming to Jed's cabin specifically to have Willow Mae tend their wounds. One evening, about a year after her arrival, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Jed spoke quietly. "Willow Mae, I need to tell you something. When I bought your contract and set you free, I told you it was because you reminded me of my sister. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." Willow Mae looked at him questioningly. "The whole truth is that even in those first few minutes, I saw something special in you," Jed continued. "Despite everything you'd been through, despite the abuse and mockery, you hadn't been broken. There was still fire in your eyes, still dignity in how you held yourself. And over this past year, I've watched you become even stronger, more confident, more fully yourself. I've fallen in love with you, Willow Mae, not because you're convenient or useful, but because of who you are, your strength, your kindness, your courage, your laugh. I love you, and I'm hoping you might feel the same." Willow Mae felt tears streaming down her face. "I do love you, Jed. I have for months. But I didn't think, I thought you just saw me as someone to rescue, not as someone to love," Jed interrupted gently. "I see you as both. You needed rescuing, and I'm glad I could help. But you're also the most remarkable woman I've ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Willow Mae said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their happiness was interrupted briefly when two men claiming to be bounty hunters arrived at the cabin, saying they were there to reclaim Willow Mae for Grint, who claimed Jed had stolen his property. But Jed produced the signed contract and the document showing he'd legally freed Willow Mae from her indenture. When the bounty hunters tried to take her anyway, Jed made his position crystal clear. "Willow Mae is my wife," he said, his rifle aimed steadily at the lead bounty hunter. "She's free. She's here by choice, and you're not taking her anywhere. Now get off my property before I shoot you for trespassing." The bounty hunters, faced with an angry mountain man who was clearly willing to fight to the death for his wife, retreated quickly. Grint never bothered them again. Jed and Willow Mae married properly in a ceremony performed by the circuit preacher, with several of Jed's old friends from his trapping days as witnesses. When Jed slipped the ring onto Willow Mae's finger and spoke his vows with fierce conviction, she felt years of shame and worthlessness finally release their hold on her heart. Years later, their cabin became known throughout the territory as a place of healing and refuge. Willow Mae's skill with medicinal herbs grew legendary, and they took in 3 orphan children, building a family that was as unconventional as it was loving. And Barnaby Steele, the merchant who had been so sure Jed was making a terrible mistake, eventually came to understand the truth. He made the journey to Jed's cabin 5 years after that fateful day, ostensibly to deliver supplies, but really to satisfy his curiosity about how the arrangement had turned out. What he found was a thriving homestead, a happy family, and a woman who bore little resemblance to the defeated girl who had sat bound in Grint's wagon. Willow Mae was confident, skilled, respected throughout the territory as a healer, and obviously deeply loved by her husband and children. "You chose well that day," Barnaby admitted to Jed. "I thought you were a fool for passing up that horse to buy her contract, but I was the fool, wasn't I?" "You were trying to sell me something I didn't need," Jed said. "A fancy horse is nice, but it wouldn't have changed my life. Willow Mae changed everything. Best $70 I ever spent." worth 100 times more than your $300 stallion ever could have been? As Barnaby rode back to Redemption Gulch, he thought about that day and what it had taught him. He'd been so focused on making a profit, on selling the expensive horse, that he'd completely missed the real value in what had transpired. Jed hadn't chosen the girl instead of the horse because he was irrational or sentimental. He'd chosen her because he understood something Barnaby was only beginning to grasp, that true value had nothing to do with price tags or appearances, and everything to do with character, potential, and the human capacity for growth and love. The mountain man had looked at an obese girl being sold as an indentured servant and seen not a burden, but a person worth investing in. And that investment had paid dividends beyond anything gold or horses could ever provide: a loving marriage, a family, a home filled with purpose and meaning, and the knowledge that he'd saved a life and helped that life flourish. Barnaby never forgot the lesson, and whenever he told the story in years to come, and he told it often, he always ended the same way. I tried to sell a mountain man a horse for $300. Instead, he spent $70 to buy a girl's freedom. I thought he was a fool. Turned out I was the fool, and he was the wisest man I ever met. The years that followed Willow May and Jed's marriage brought changes neither could have anticipated. Their reputation spread throughout the Wyoming Territory, and their cabin became a beacon for those in need, not just for Willow May's healing skills, but for the compassion and acceptance they showed to everyone who came to their door. 3 winters after their wedding, a particularly harsh storm drove a Shoshone family to seek shelter at their cabin. The family's young daughter was burning with fever, and the parents were desperate. Willow May worked through the night, using every herb and technique she'd learned, while Jed kept the fire burning and provided whatever assistance she needed. By dawn, the fever had broken, and the little girl would survive. The grateful parents, Gray Wolf and Morning Star, became close friends. Through them, Willow May learned additional healing techniques passed down through generations of Shoshone healers. Gray Wolf taught Jed tracking skills that even the experienced mountain man hadn't known. The friendship between the two families became a bridge between cultures, with each learning from and respecting the other. "You have a gift," Morning Star told Willow May one day as they worked together preparing medicines. "Not just for healing bodies, but for healing spirits. You understand pain because you've lived it. That makes your medicine stronger." Willow May had never thought of her past suffering as a gift, but Morning Star's words helped her reframe those difficult years. The abuse she'd endured, the mockery she'd survived, the shame she'd overcome, all of it had given her empathy and understanding that made her a better healer. She could look at a beaten woman or an abused child and truly understand their pain, could offer not just medicine, but hope based on her own transformation. As word of Willow May's healing abilities spread, people traveled from increasingly distant settlements to seek her help. Some paid with money, others with goods, still others with nothing but gratitude. Willow May and Jed turned no one away. The extra income allowed them to expand their cabin, adding a small infirmary room where Willow May could treat patients who needed extended care. One spring morning, a wagon arrived carrying a man, his wife, and 5 children, the oldest no more than 12. The man, whose name was Thomas Brennan, explained their situation with exhausted desperation. "We're heading to Oregon," he said. "Got family there who'll help us start fresh. But my wife Catherine took ill 3 days ago. She's getting worse, and I'm afraid she's dying. The doctor in the last town said there was nothing he could do, but someone told us about a healer in these mountains who might be able to help. Willow May examined Catherine and recognized the symptoms immediately: childbed fever, probably from a miscarriage that had gone wrong. She'd seen it before and knew it was often fatal without aggressive treatment. "I can help her," Willow May said, "but she'll need to stay here for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. She's very sick, and the treatment is intensive." Thomas's face crumpled with relief and then concern. "We don't have money to pay you. Lost most of what we had when our wagon broke an axle 50 miles back. I can work to pay off the debt." "You don't owe us anything," Jed interrupted. "Your wife needs help. Your children need a safe place to stay while she recovers. That's enough reason to help." The Brennan family stayed for 3 weeks, while Willow May treated Catherine with a combination of herbal medicines, careful nursing, and the kind of compassionate presence that helped patients fight to survive. The children, ranging from 12-year-old Samuel down to 4-year-old twin girls, Lucy and Lily, quickly adapted to life at the cabin, helping with chores and playing in the mountain meadows. Jed found himself teaching Samuel to shoot and track, passing on skills the boy would need to help protect his family on the dangerous trail to Oregon. Thomas, once his terror for his wife's life eased, proved to be a skilled carpenter and repaired several items around the cabin that Jed had been meaning to fix for months. By the time Catherine was well enough to travel, the two families had bonded deeply. The Brennans departed with tears and promises to write once they reached Oregon, and the cabin felt oddly empty after their departure. "We should have children," Willow May said that evening as she and Jed sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I mean, I know we've talked about it, but seeing those children here, seeing how good you were with Samuel, I think we'd be good parents, Jed." Jed pulled her close. "I think so, too. And I'd love nothing more than to have a family with you. But Willow, I need you to know something. If we can't have children of our own, that's fine, too. We could foster or adopt children who need homes. What matters to me is building a life with you, however that life looks." As it turned out, children did come into their lives, though not in the way they'd initially planned. 6 months after the Brennans left, a different wagon arrived, this one driven by a grim-faced sheriff and carrying 3 orphan children whose parents had died in a typhoid outbreak. "I've got nowhere to take them," Sheriff Morrison said bluntly. "The nearest orphanage is 300 miles away, and I can't spare the time for that journey. I heard you folks sometimes take in people who need help. These children need help." The children were 2 boys and a girl, Jacob, age 10, Matthew, age 7, and little Emma, age 4. They were traumatized, grieving, and clearly terrified of what would happen to them. Willow May took one look at Emma's tear-stained face and made a decision. "They can stay with us," she said, "for as long as they need." What was intended as a temporary arrangement became permanent. The children thrived under Willow May and Jed's care, healing from their trauma and blossoming into confident, capable young people. Jacob proved to have his father's talent for carpentry. Matthew was fascinated by Willow May's healing work and became her apprentice. And Emma, the youngest, grew into a cheerful, loving child who called Willow May and Jed Mama and Papa without prompting. 2 years after the first 3 children arrived, Sheriff Morrison brought 2 more siblings whose father had died in a mining accident and whose mother had died of grief shortly after. Then came a Shoshone boy whose parents had been killed during a clash with settlers, brought to Jed and Willow Mae by Gray Wolf, with the request that they raise him in a place where both cultures would be respected. Their cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Jed building additional rooms and the older children helping with construction. What had started as a haven for one rescued woman and one grieving mountain man became a true home for an entire family of people who had all needed saving in one way or another. Barnaby Steele visited again 7 years after that first fateful day, this time bringing supplies and genuine friendship rather than sales pitches. He arrived to find the expanded cabin bustling with activity children doing chores, Willow Mae teaching Matthew advanced healing techniques, Jed working with Jacob on a new barn, and the whole place radiating warmth and purpose. "How many children do you have now?" Barnaby asked, trying to keep track of all the young faces. "8," Willow Mae said with a smile. "3 through the sheriff, 1 through Gray Wolf and Morning Star, and 4 who came to us various other ways. Plus, we're expecting a baby girl whose mother died in childbirth last week. The father can't care for her alone, so he's asked if we'll take her." 9 children, Barnaby said, shaking his head in wonder. "And you started all this because Jed chose to buy your contract instead of my horse." "Best $70 ever spent," Jed said, coming over to join them. He put his arm around Willow Mae's shoulders. "I got a wife, a family, a purpose, and a life worth living. Your horse would have been nice, Barnaby, but it wouldn't have given me any of that." That evening, Barnaby stayed for dinner and witnessed the organized chaos of the Stone household at mealtime. 9 children of various ages, backgrounds, and personalities all gathered around an extended table, sharing food and conversation with obvious love and acceptance. Willow Mae and Jed moved among them with practiced ease, settling disputes, answering questions, and creating an atmosphere where every child clearly felt valued and safe. After the children were in bed, Barnaby sat with Jed and Willow Mae on the porch, as had become his custom during visits. "I need to tell you something," Barnaby said. "That day 7 years ago, when you chose to buy Willow Mae's contract instead of my horse, I was angry. Thought you were a fool throwing away money on a lost cause. But watching you these past few years, seeing what you've built here, you taught me the most valuable lesson of my life." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'd spent my whole career as a merchant focused on profit margins and sales. I looked at everything, including people, in terms of what they could earn me. But you looked at a beaten, obese girl being sold as an indentured servant and saw a person worth investing in. Not because she could make you money, but because she was a human being who deserved dignity and a chance at a better life. I started paying attention after that," Barnaby continued. "Started looking at the people I dealt with as people, not just customers or commodities. Started asking myself what I could do to help, not just what I could profit from. Changed my whole business, changed my whole life. I owe you both a debt for that lesson." "You don't owe us anything," Willow Mae said gently. "But I'm glad our story helped you see people differently. That's what Jed did for me. He saw me differently than anyone ever had. Saw me as worthy of respect and kindness. That changed everything." Barnaby left the next morning with a wagon full of furs and herbs to sell in Redemption Gulch, a business arrangement that had evolved into a genuine partnership with Barnaby helping market Willow May's medicinal preparations and Jed's trapline products. But more than that, he left with a renewed sense of purpose and a continued commitment to the lesson the Stones had taught him. As the years passed and the Stone children grew, their story became legendary throughout the territory. People would point to the sprawling cabin in the mountains and tell newcomers, "That's where the mountain man lives, the one who chose a girl over a horse and built an entire family from that one choice." Jacob, the first orphan they'd taken in, grew into a skilled carpenter who built homes throughout the territory, always remembering to create spaces for the marginalized and forgotten. Matthew became a renowned healer in his own right, carrying on Willow May's teachings and her commitment to helping anyone who needed it, regardless of their ability to pay. Emma grew into a teacher, establishing a school that welcomed all children, white, Native American, mixed race, wealthy, or poor. The other children, each in their own way, carried forward the lesson of unconditional acceptance and dignity they'd learned in the Stone household. They built lives based not on profit or appearance, but on character and compassion, creating ripples of positive change that spread far beyond what Jed and Willow May could have imagined. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Jed and Willow May stood on their porch watching the sunset, much as they had countless times before. Their hair was gray now, their bodies showing the wear of hard mountain living, but their love had only deepened with time. "Do you ever think about that day in Redemption Gulch?" Willow May asked. "When Grant had me in that wagon and you paid $70 for my contract?" "All the time," Jed admitted, "but not with regret, with gratitude. That was the day my real life began. Everything before was just preparing me to recognize what mattered when I finally saw it." "Barnaby still tells people you were a fool for choosing me over that horse," Willow May said with a smile. "He tells them I was a fool who turned out to be wiser than anyone expected," Jed corrected. "Big difference. Besides, that horse would have been dead by now. You and I are still here, still building this life together, still making a difference. I'd say I made the right choice." Willow May leaned into his embrace, looking out at the land they'd built their life on. "When I was sitting in that wagon, bruised and beaten, and certain my life was effectively over, I never imagined this. A loving husband, children who call me mother, a skill that helps people, respect from the community. You gave me all of that, Jed." "You gave it to yourself," Jed said. "I just created the space for you to become who you always had the potential to be. You did the hard work of healing and growing and becoming the remarkable woman you are." As the sun set over the mountains and the sound of their grandchildren playing inside drifted through the open windows, Jed and Willow May held each other and reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. It had started with a merchant trying to sell a horse, a cruel man selling a girl's contract, and a mountain man who chose compassion over commerce. That one choice, $70 for a girl's freedom instead of $300 for a prize stallion, had created a legacy that would endure for generations. It had built a family, changed a community, and proven beyond any doubt that true value had nothing to do with price tags or appearances, and everything to do with the courage to see others truly and the compassion to help them become their best selves. The merchant had wanted to sell a horse. Instead, the mountain man chose the obese girl, and in doing so, he chose love over profit, compassion over convenience, and human dignity over commercial transaction. It was, everyone agreed, the best investment any of them had ever witnessed.